So good morning, good local time. I see Ihor, who is not in mourning at this point. Today is Friday, July 15th, and this is part 2 of the Kubernetes Community Retrospective. It is a recorded meeting that will be published on YouTube, and I will hand this now over to Jason Singer-Dumars, who is going to be our guest moderator.
Thank you for the wonderful introduction. Just a little bit of background. This is part 2 of the retrospective. We ran over time last time, and to respect the fact that we had a lot of input that didn't make it into the document, we felt it was important to continue a discussion. As such, I'm just going to quickly go over the working agreements that we had from last time and respectfully ask if anybody has any to add that we do that now. Working agreements simply are a way that we can all work best through this process to make sure everybody's heard and that opinions are respected and documented. So the working agreements from last time were that we respectfully communicate with one another, that we try, if at all possible, to not point fingers. So instead of blame, we try and seek solutions and collaboration. And issues are system problems and not individual or fault. That is a really big deal because essentially we're working on a giant robot, if you will, and it's something that we need to do in a way that we respect the problem is in the robot and not the people that built it. And lastly, this is a huge one just procedurally. If you're not speaking, please mute. There is a raise your hand feature as well in Zoom if you're using that. And if Sarah is available to unmute you, she will do that. Otherwise, unmute yourself. And on the right side of the document, if you scroll down, I have added some comments which are simply telling us how long we should allocate for each part of these discussions, just so we don't run over, because last time we definitely did that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the last parts of the feedback. And essentially, these were the items that we had asked people to talk about in terms of what could have gone better. So these are definitely areas where we want to identify and target improvements. And those specific improvements we'll go into in the following section. So if you have something to add to the bottom of the bullet point list here, please do. We're starting at the word better, and we will go from there. And we have 15 minutes. So. Starting with better documentation around development, versions of Docker being tested, OSs, and the submit queue, testing against, etc. I'm not sure we'll have the person who actually submitted this as an item, but is there anybody that would like to speak to this?
I think broadly this has been work that has been happening in 1.3. We covered it at fairly great length with all of the changes that were going in ahead of, during, and through the 1.3 release, and it is work, and that the work continues during this as a highlighted improvement.
Okay, cool. Let's move on. Would like to see more effort given via discussions before closing pull requests with form comments. IOW mini PRs are closed with little or no discussion. Would someone like to speak to this?
We may not end up having the same people, so.
Seems like, all right. Well, I think that, and to your point earlier, Sarah, this seems like this is another one that has been given a lot of attention.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like the pull requests are being handled more deftly now than they were, say, 3 months ago for sure, 2 months ago. All right, honoring cutoff dates. Clearly, there's been a huge amount of work done, Ihor and others, to talk about how we better manage cutoff dates and milestones. So do you want to speak to that? Or Aaron?
See, Ihor.
Well, So maybe just in light of yesterday's Council of Elders proposal, I'm sort of wondering, would the Council of Elders be a tool that could be used to enforce cutoff dates a little bit better?
I think that's certainly a possibility. I think we could also, as a community, say we need to do this and have to do it. And if anything that slips through needs to be discussed at greater length. Although, Erin, you participated in a bunch of the burn down meetings. Did you feel that the cutoffs were not discussed in a meaningful and appropriate way there to make a decision to move forward with something even beyond the cutoff, or were there still, this is just happening kind of things?
So number one, I apologize, but I didn't really attend as many of the 130 burn downs this time. So there may have been a lot discussed there that I completely missed. I think that in the name of transparency, one thing that can be done for these burn down meetings, and I think we sort of started to see this from TJ as things consolidated towards a release, was daily reports. Yep. About what actually was discussed and what the follow-up was, because generally that sort of filtered out in Slack messages and movement on a bunch of random issues if you weren't participating in that meeting. I guess the other question here is what exactly a cutoff date means. So like, I'm sort of curious if we're talking about cutoff dates in the context of earlier go, no-go decisions prior to code slush, or if we're talking about we should have cut off the release when we said we were going to cut the release, not, deferred a week or two because of random issues.
Right. I think there were 3 places where we may or may not have honored our cutoff dates in a way that met with the agreements with the community. That would be going into code slush. Like, do we lock features there? We didn't lock. We allowed feature feature PRs to come in after the code slush. That was the big storage entrance. Then we continued to add and cherry pick things in during the code slush, which I do think was within the agreements, but didn't necessarily, could have been better communicated, didn't necessarily have to happen, still open for discussion. And then the choice to hold the release while we actually fixed the critical bug, which I think was the right decision, met with the agreements, was fairly well communicated. But of course, in every situation, we want to find bugs earlier.
Absolutely. So I just, from like looking at the 1.3 release plan, I think there had been sort of a checkpoint we were going to have every couple of weeks at the community meeting where we're going to review like what was supposed to go in and then sort of say, is this still on track? Yes, it is. No, it isn't. That actually happened.
It happened erratically, and I think we could codify it. Maybe it's the first. It's hard to say the first of every month because there would only be 2 in a 7-week coding period. How much time do you want to spend in those community meetings on this? And maybe the answer is quite a bit.
I think I would say quite a bit, and I think I know at least on our team, the tension was sort of palpable because we would show up to the community meetings expecting that there would be a forum to discuss some of the new release issues, and then the community meeting would be 90% like new feature stuff going forward, and so I know we would feel, we would come out of those community meetings sort of feeling like, oh, but really important stuff wasn't getting discussed. So achieving that balance, I think, is going to be a hard one. And I think it's probably largely in your lap, Sarah, since you run that meeting. Well,
and I'm gonna flip this right back to you because this meeting is a crowdsourced agenda. So if you want to see something in the agenda, stick it in the notes. I then find someone.
Okay. Totally. So I sort of maybe what might be missing from the community meeting, just the same way we have like a demo from the community every week. We really should have some sort of discussion about either the 1.4 release or like a particular feature on the release, a real deep dive on like somebody who's owning that feature should stand up and advocate for it. maybe, I don't know, just to sort of, you know how we have like the 5 days of Kubernetes after there's a release on the blog?
Right.
Like something akin to that to give people an idea of what may potentially be landing in a given Kubernetes release.
Okay.
Just sort of a recurring way to like give a forum to talk about what's going into the release to the community sort of deal.
Yep. I'm also going to be enforcing SIG reporting going forward. I haven't said that anywhere but here yet, but I'm going to send an email probably first of next week to the SIG leads saying, you're going to get drafted because we're not getting, and maybe the answer is you're going to get drafted. We need to understand what your SIG is doing in the 1.4 timeline, and there needs to be what are those things, and you need to be reporting on them. And it won't be every week, but it'll be more regularly.
Yeah, big plus from me. At the same time, so I'd like to, I suppose that it would be useful if we'll split the meetings. So we have to discuss some generic and some really important stuff during the community meeting. At the same time, I'd like to propose to run something like burnout meetings on a regular basis. Not every day, not every 2 days, but for example, every week or every 2 weeks, where we'll discuss some technical stuff that is going to be included into the current release. So it will be really useful because people who are interested in that stuff have to be up to date with everything that happens within the community and within the technical set of community. So including some new features, including some important bug fixes and everything else. At the same time, I agree with Aaron that we have to include some really important stuff into our community meetings.
So Ihor, one of the requests I've had in the last week or so is that we do more of that technical work in the community meeting. I just need to know which topics are the important topics in a given week. So I'm not able to read and keep up on all the things that are happening.
I agree with you. That's why I'm proposing to cut these things and move them to some separate meeting where we'll discuss that. Like we have our burnout meetings and we discuss that stuff there. So that's why I'm proposing to run these burnout meetings on a more regular basis and discuss that stuff there. At the same time, community meetings is like the meeting with a real community, with users of Kubernetes, with consumers of Kubernetes, and some of them are not interested in the under the hood stuff. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm proposing to run some like 2 tracks of all of that.
I have proposed this in the past, along with the notion of like a release SIG, where the release has a regular cadence meeting that's separate from the community meeting. I totally support that proposal. I think having at least a place where the release issues are regularly discussed, those who are interested can go to it. At present, the only place to do that is the community meeting. So I think it either needs to be a regular part of the community meeting, or it needs its own separate forum that those that are interested in.
What is wrong with meeting? And we need to have some dashboard, ideally based on features repository, right, which indicates the progress. And hopefully, Sarah, you can help pushing SIG leads to update.
Yep.
Even if it's for now informally in features, just indicate percentage or whatever.
Right.
The burn down, and we can update the dashboard on a separate meeting, and on community, just update the community. I don't think community has too many people to kind of start going through all the features. It will be a 3-hour meeting.
Yeah, I agree.
So hold on. So Daniel actually has been trying to say something.
Yeah, I was wondering what is wrong with individual SIGs for that sort of discussion? Like if you want the behind the scenes status of something, why not attend the SIG that is about that thing?
The main problem with SIGs is that we don't have enough SIG reports during the community meeting.
Yeah, I think that one of the things which came out in community meetings many times, there is no single place to have a high-level overview of the most important features coming out in this particular release. So whilst each SIG, yes, I agree, each SIG should be able to discuss, and kind of if people are interested in particular SIG, they should join that meeting. If we can have some high-level dashboard with overview, hey, this is a major feature, say, pet set, and whatever kind of Kubernetes, whatever the major features on 1.3 release, and what's the current status, what's going to happen. It's more the desires and having every little detail discussed on.
Yeah, the same stuff that we have been running with Mike during the 1.3 release. So we're expecting to run that in 1.4. That I've started working on that and like collaborating with Mike and all of the guys. We are working on that. So I suppose the dashboard will be like the great visualization for that. At the same time, we have to run also some discussions regarding that because we have to discuss some stuff that's really important.
I guess it's just it's
yeah,
a lot of.
Sorry, I have to be moderator for just a second. Two things. One is we have about 5 more minutes allocated for this section, the discussion. I'm happy to extend it by 5 minutes if there's agreement on that. But one part of that is that I'm hearing a lot of suggestions about we could create a dashboard or we could do this or that. I want to make sure that if we're saying that these are suggestions that we want to pursue as a community, that you add them into the action items and take ownership by putting your name by it. Otherwise, these things will be just drifting off into the wind and not getting any action. So let's continue for the next 5 minutes. There's 2 more items that have been added, actually 3 now. Let's cover those, and then if we need to revisit any of these other things, let's do that. Sound good?
Can we also close up with what Daniel was going to?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I was just going to say that I understand the need, but from my perspective, it's actually quite a significant amount of work to update the status of everything in many different places. So I don't really have a good solution in mind. But yeah, so I'm just sort of throwing it out there that this is too much effort.
Daniel, let's you and I also work on getting more activation of other people in your SIG doing things with you. So it's not that you are having to do all of this chopping wood and carrying water.
Maybe that would help.
Okay. Not convinced. You and I can take that part offline.
Sure.
I think there's like a difference between a SIG owner and a feature owner, perhaps.
True.
Yeah.
But so I put down the next 2 things. They're kind of related, and they have to do with release notes. So as a cluster operator, there was a breaking changes, I think, in the 1.3 release notes. Let me go take a look. Known issues and important steps before upgrading was the section, but there wasn't an action required section. There was an action required section for each of the beta releases, which kind of vaguely hinted at, hey, if you're using the SkyDNS add-on, guess what? It changed. This sort of translated in the 1.3 release notes to DNS now supports cluster federation. But like behind the scenes, that actually broke some stuff for those of us who don't use the standard Kubernetes cluster stand-up code, and it made our clusters non-conformant. And this was something that just really kind of...
Okay, so that sounds just like a straight up bug in the release notes. Like if we had action required, we have an action required label on our release note action required. Like if that didn't make it into the final release notes, that sounds like just a straight up bug, and maybe we can file an issue about that.
Yeah, could be, because there's like straight up no action required section whatsoever. And this is one specific example.
That just sounds like a bug.
Yeah. But just symptomatically, I had other things that were going on while we were driving towards the release. But I sort of noticed through SIG testing that people were trying to chase in these DNS conformance-related failures. And I didn't really quite grok what that was about. I know that Federation really, really had to get in for 1.3. So this was being pushed hard, and it just kind of snuck right by. So back again to like really vocal broadcasting of the status of your feature. It seems like what happened is the agreement had either explicitly or implicitly been made. I don't know, that like this is going in, so whatever it takes to get it in fully has to happen. Like, I think I missed that conversation. But I totally agree, this is a bug. We can happily file a bug on this. I'm just sort of calling out, like, as a cluster operator, maybe what could be done to improve this is to like get, I don't know, right? Have people use your betas and actually read your beta release notes, but then the changes were called out there. So I'm not entirely sure.
Would you classify the next one you put in about SkyDNS kind of the similar issue, or does that have a different?
Well, so I'm just calling out that specific occurrence, but it seems like there should be an action required section, just full stop. If there was for any of the betas, you probably want to like roll all of that up, because I'm coming to it as somebody who has never looked at this until like I'm upgrading from 1.2 to 1.3. So I don't know any of the step-by-step things that have happened in the beta. I need all of that to be rolled up.
Cool. We have 1 minute to hit this last bullet point. Go for it, whoever put this in here.
And sorry, in terms of betas, they were pretty short, right, and rushed. I understand the release cycle is short, but there was no meaningful way to do much about betas. So to return to burn down meetings, those were great. Right? At least doing it for the 1.4.
Great. Okay, cool. Well, we're on time. Next is, I think, the most exciting part of the retro, which is all the things that we've gone over here can lead into things we can do better for 1.4 and beyond. So I have some things here. A lot of these are from last time. Also, we have the things here. Some of these have rolled up in action items, some have not. So what I'd like to do is just freeform, have everybody, if you see things here you want to add as far as things that we should do differently, please do. If this is an action item that's attached to it, I'd love to see you put it in there and take ownership. Daniel, how do you feel in terms of the process, the things that you're working on? It seems like you're really heavily burdened with a lot of these things that are going on. Can we help you as a community? Are there things that we can do to increase membership in SIG testing, or something that would be good for you? Because that's a lot.
So I took on quite a lot of work last time around because our testing needed some help, but I have going back to my own area this time around. So it would be good to have somebody who wants to play MergeBot Czar and basically just go out and hammer on things that are blocking the merge queue. So I still occasionally look at that, but I don't think it's going to take that much of my time next release.
Can we get someone to volunteer to be the first look, your buddy in this, in the terms of, I'm willing to take the first look at everything that is, all broken merge stuff, but escalate to you, Daniel, or someone else in the team when this person gets out of his or her depth?
I'm happy to be escalated to if somebody is looking at something and I can help them. Yeah.
So maybe the answer in this is we identify someone from the community who wants a project to take on learning the merge queue automation and working with Daniel on that as necessary this release.
So is this separate from the Kate's on call role that's rotated through?
So we have a build cop rotation here inside Google, and the responsibility of that role is investigating test failures. So in theory, somebody is doing this. It wouldn't be bad to have a backup person, and also the role is a week-long rotating rotation. So you lose text after a week.
So really what we're looking for is someone who's got larger oversight over a broader period of time, who's still capable of acting in that role if need be, but maybe more in an advisory capacity.
Yes. Well, it's not just advisory capacity. It's also like there are things that need to be done, and sometimes it's just for one person to do them, or at least have a compelling roadmap.
Great. So I'm not necessarily signing up for this because I'm already out of bandwidth, but I'm wondering if it would be helpful for the community or to sort of encourage some volunteers if we could get some kind of overview of the past 2 months of fun that you've been wading through, just to sort of understand where we were, what's been done, and how far we think we have to go. I'm certainly happy to help collaborate with you on that offline. Maybe that's a SIG testing presentation. Maybe that's a community presentation. But I don't know that actually is an action item specifically on getting this role filled.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do a VC that anyone could attend on this. Sure.
Awesome.
This is Brandon Phillips. I'd love to attend that. I think rotating people would be really helpful to reduce burden on single boards and people.
Cool. This is great, you guys. Seems like we've got some things we can do from that. Fantastic.
So on the release notes section, I'm just kind of brainstorming here. The past two burn down meetings that I attended, past two releases, I guess, when I did attend the burn down meetings, it seemed like docs were saved for the very last. It was more important that the bits get cut or the docs got finalized. And I think realistically, this has put us in a situation where each release, the docs haven't really been super ready until about 2 weeks after the release has been put out. I'm wondering if we want to try swapping the order of that a little bit, such that like the docs for your feature have to be kind of baked before you're actually allowed to cut your features bits part of the release. Or just some sort of like preemptive, like the release notes should not be an afterthought. What can we do to have the release notes happen first and then have time to sanity check those release notes?
This is a really good point. This is Aparna.
Aparna, can you come closer to a microphone? We can barely hear you.
Somebody's also heavily breathing.
Yes, I'm trying to find the heavy breather currently. It sounds really wrong, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to second that point. I had quite a bit of trouble. You know, I ran a webinar afterwards, and so many of the features that we had launched, we didn't have details on. We didn't have good documentation on, and this was a week afterwards. So but I think that there is a challenge in pre-announcing stuff because we want to make sure that, you know, press and other coverage, everything is properly timed. But yeah, I think we can certainly work to, it would be great if we could reduce the delay in documentation and have it like ready the day of launch.
So it seems from a project management and release management standpoint that this might be a decision that falls in the realm of the elders or possibly whoever's taking on the role of the release manager. Otherwise, so I mean, this goes back to the birth of Agile, right? Working software over comprehensive documentation, and this is a battle that is fought all the time. So we need to find where that line gets drawn, and probably have some sort of formalized decision about what level of code coverage and documentation coverage is necessary to complete a release. So sounds like a to-do item somewhere. Anybody disagree, agree?
I think one thing that might help, and maybe I can take this up with Eric, is on the features repo. One of the things we do a lot is like Readme driven development. So like you write the Readme for the thing you're about to build. And that might be something where we have like a doc that's being drafted on the feature while things go along, like what the actual experience is at the end of the feature being released. I do feel like there's really no place right now to like have a work in progress doc of the end experience. It's really hard to like start the docs and clear where to do that.
I +1 that. I've seen it work fantastically. That would probably be part of the recommendation, I assume. So I'll put that in the item. All right. Further things that we can do better next time. This is great.
So in this list says release meetings. So this would be longer running, not just between code freeze and release. This suggestion was more bounded from the beginning.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So just one of the things I've seen overall is just the decision-making hierarchy is getting relatively complex in terms of what is the domain of release management versus what is the domain of the SIGs versus. So is there an idea, or have we thought about maybe some sort of org chart type things so we understand who's sort of responsible for what? Because I think people in the community would have a hard time understanding without watching for a full release cycle who is kind of leading what and how and why. And it might be just a document or something like that. I don't know. But does anybody have any thoughts on how best to negotiate that?
There is in theory a document in GitHub, which Bryant, I believe, created with areas and responsibilities and who's responsible. But yeah, I think kind of my feedback, sometimes people on vacation, on the areas shift, I don't think this document is necessarily up to date. And it's not the easiest one to find.
So there's a list of code base owners based on directories. There's a list of special interest group leads, which can also usually get you pretty far. And then there's the new proposal around the elders group. But I think coalescing that into some cohesive picture would be helpful.
Okay.
And Sarah, I would say that the release specific roles
aren't documented anywhere, really. Yes.
Yeah, and that probably needs to be, here's the standard set of roles, and then who takes them on gets rotated.
Right. Yep. One of the suggestions was a release special interest group, so that has rotating people and rotating updates. So that might be one way that could be handled.
Because this is interesting to me, I guess, specifically, I'll take this as an action item. So
cool.
To be true to my own desires here.
So I know we've talked about the features repo a couple times, especially during the community meeting, but I don't see that our use of it is actually documented as something we're going to do differently for 1.4.
But we should, because we are.
Right. One question I had about that is just looking at the features repo. There are 10 open issues, but it's unclear to me which of those are slated for 1.4 versus which are just being brainstormed out.
I'm working on that. So yesterday in community meeting, I've proposed to create a milestone 1.4. So I've already created that, and I'm going to mark the issues that are going to be added to 1.4 as 1.4 milestone issues. Possibly we also have. Sorry?
I said I think we should document that as an action item.
Yes, please. Yeah, so also after yesterday community meeting, I might also propose to create something like the next milestone because not all the features are going to be added to 1.4, but we also have to mark them just to define that they have to be added to some other release, not to 1.4. So I'm going to also handle that item.
And Sarah, we discussed yesterday, I think the PM group is going to get a slot in one of the upcoming community meetings to discuss the output of the 1.4 planning and sort of what the backlog is post-start planning, which we haven't yet fully completed.
Yep, most of the 1.4 planning updates have been planning about planning, not planning to execution.
Yeah, so I think the next update we're gonna discuss the backlog.
Right.
Excellent. All right. All right. Anything else? I'm noticing that we don't have anybody volunteering for Daniel's cohort. Anybody? Aaron? I can see the look on your face.
I mean, I really want to, I want to, but I'm just being realistic about the bandwidth that I have based on what I've been able to accomplish in SIG testing thus far. I think I can be of more value in helping be communicative about this stuff because I care deeply about this. I think it's super important. I think Daniel's done a lot of great work. But that's kind of all the bandwidth I have to offer at the moment.
I know.
Maybe we do this differently. Hey, Bob, can you help free up Aaron so he can do this?
Whoa! Oh, snap.
Well played.
So,
Well, this is actually.
I guess
if I could jump in.
I have one fundamental question, which is it possible for a non-Google employee to even be effective in this role, realistically?
This is part of what we need to find out and we need to fix, is my estimation.
I'll volunteer and I'll help figure it out if it works.
Wow, cool.
Yay, thank you, Brandon.
Brandon, that's awesome.
I see that Dims has proposed himself, but he's also don't see himself as really effective for that in our chat.
Yeah, I'm very new here, so I don't know most of the stuff that happens around here. So
then what about...
I'm willing to shadow Daniel and whoever else is.
And Brandon?
Yeah.
Okay, if you, so sign up in the doc. I'm putting Brandon there, but
I'll add myself.
perfect.
Awesome. Thank you both.
Wow,
This is huge.
that's really huge. Thank you, thank you.
I'll just say this as I wouldn't necessarily put this down as an action item, but it's something that Ryan and I think Daniel first proposed the idea. If not right now, very shortly, tests are going to be assigned owners based on a file in the Kubernetes repo. And if those tests flake, the flakes are automatically going to be assigned to those owners. And I think that was called out somewhere in here as focusing less on testing and that sort of stuff. That is
either running live or will be the next time the merge queue gets rebooted.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. All right. And person who volunteered to be the shadower, please update the owners section. That would be great.
I think that was Dims.
I'm trying to figure out where to update.
Bottom of the document in the action items.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
Thanks, Brandon. Cool. Okay. We have, wow, we're doing good on time. We still have about 14 minutes allocated for this section. Is there anything else that people want to add? One question I had was, do we have an idea about retiring SIGs or dealing with currency of SIGs, so when they start to lose momentum, or there's maybe we think some things in a specific SIG that is being covered that isn't?
We don't have anything at the moment that looks like that. We have done it on an ad hoc basis before, though.
Okay.
I would say that maybe somehow could get wrapped up with the enforced SIG reports. So basically, if a SIG doesn't report within a certain amount of time, it's effectively the same as the SIG not being there.
Right.
And I do think we probably should have it documented how we're going to handle that process, but that would be the first step.
Cool. That's a great suggestion.
Yeah, possibly we may add these notes to, like I noticed that some SIGs are writing their meeting notes on a GitHub. Possibly, I'm not sure that it's a good idea to run meeting notes to add meeting notes on a GitHub, but possibly adding some status updates, like the static status updates on GitHub might be a good alternative to a dynamic document.
There's a group that is a Google group called the Special Interest Group Leads, if I remember correctly, or Kubernetes Special Interest Group Leads, where we can discuss this, and everyone who is a lead of a SIG should already be on that.
You're speaking about Melendez, right? Yeah. It's another good place, yeah. I forgot about it.
One question on 1.4 planning, right? We still planning to have planning, but in reality, we are supposed to start freezing the code about a month from now. Does it make much sense to do planning beyond saying, honestly, it's a catch-up release with whatever fell through 1.3 at this point?
Maybe that's up to each SIG to sort of decide. I don't know, but that's the tack that SIG Scale took, definitely. This is sort of our stabilization release.
Yep.
Parna, perhaps you could speak a little more to that, as far as what is going on from the Google efforts?
Could you repeat the question?
So my concern is kind of, right, so we still haven't had community planning, and in a month from now, we're supposed to be freezing the code.
Yeah. Yes. So that's what I was referring earlier, that we've been collecting the set of work we would like to do for 1.4 and prioritizing it. There's a bit more that we need to do over the next week, and then in the next community meeting, the PM group, which was recently formed, would like to come back with, here's the proposed set of features for 1.4, and also a timeline for when to close, which, this is the first time I guess we are doing this process, so we will try that out.
Well, I think the elephant in the room on this is whether we really mean it about the mid-August close for the release, or is what's really going to happen is there's going to be a bunch of interest in some features that some important subset of the community feels like is really important, and we just have to have more time to get them in, and so the release is really going to slip out a month beyond that.
So, to the extent that I have a vote, and I am but one person, I was actually planning on sharing it with the Kubernetes. I literally have a draft open in my mail today. I was planning on sharing it with Kubernetes dev. And asking and saying, like, look, guys and girls, unless we are not, unless we leave open the thing, we should declare a close date. And so I was going to propose something like next Friday and say, look, if your proposal, including Googlers, is, impacts open source, requires a proposal according to our team, the team of Kubernetes PM, and does not at least have the proposal in the feature repo, it's out. I'm okay being hardcore about that. That said, this is our first time, and I ask us all to be a little bit lenient, and properly shame people that don't do it, but do our best. So yeah. That's my proposal, and so by next. It wasn't my intent to announce this over this discussion, but I will send this later today, again, as I check in with folks and make sure that this is okay, but I'd like to propose by next Friday, you have to have at least your one line, and it literally is one sentence proposal in the feature repo by next Friday. So you have really no excuse. There's no work involved here. It's one line and a clone. So do it.
I'm concerned this might raise the question of, so what specifically is a feature, and how big does my work have to be before I have to get it in the features repo versus me just submitting a PR to Kubernetes?
I think that's something that the PM group has struggled with. We're not going to, if there's a PR that solves a bug, but it's big, maybe, we have to try not to waterfall this out. And I'm not implying that you're saying that, but let's just take a gut check with everyone and say, if you think that this is something that you would write a blog post about, or that it substantially impacts somebody's behavior, or is something you're just proud of and want to show your boss, probably write a feature. If it's something that's not terribly interesting from the public point of view, but even if it's very significant from an underlying standpoint, then I would say, maybe you don't need a feature repo. But again, this is live and learn. Let's just try and do our best. Default on the end of doing a proposal versus not, but just do your best.
So I think we are going to be firm on timelines as a group. We have been trying to do that very firmly in the last release, and it has worked. It's starting to work better, and I think we want to do that here. Certainly, if we're firm on when the release is, then we have to be firm on when the features need to be specified, and when the design needs to be completed, and when the code needs to be completed. That doesn't mean that in conjunction with that, we will have a backlog, and we won't necessarily be able to say how far down the backlog we'll make it in 1.4. So that's just based on like how much progress you make, how much progress that any given team makes, and whether they meet their milestones according to the deadline.
So I'm a little concerned that we're sort of talking a little bit more about what we're going to do in 1.4 at a level of detail that probably needs a better audience than the one we're giving it right now. Is there a way that we can raise this really important issue? I mean, obviously, you know, David, you're going to be presenting this. Or how are you planning on sharing your proposal? What's the audience?
Well, we've shared many times the feature repo. We've said many, many, many times that if you want to work on something in 1.4, you need to have a feature repo. You need to have a proposal in the feature repo. We have not yet, and we've also shared many times the timeline for 1.4, and it's in fact no different than 1.3 or 1.2 as far as like where features happen, where testing happens, where slush happens.
It is significantly shorter.
It is significantly
shorter than those.
Yes, all true. But we have shared it. You couldn't respond and say it wasn't shorter if you didn't know what it was, which you do. So my point is that we've done all the like sharing. We have not yet shared my proposal. It literally was just me talking with some folks, realizing that we hadn't said like, hey, when do you have to have your feature stub in for better or worse? I was going to share it with Kubernetes dev today and remind people regularly over the course of the next week.
Okay. I think just making sure that we're elevating that conversation, and it might be worth mentioning, I mean, the community meeting is a little late, if that's indeed the timeline, but if there's, I guess, as a community, if we can ensure that we're having those discussions with people that we know are stakeholders or who might be blindsided by that short timeline, then we should probably do our best to do that just as a community.
Yeah, I think the PM group will get together, align on the timelines early next week, and then at the community meeting, we would like to share out what is currently in the feature repo, what we're seeing as the backlog, and then when we plan to close it out.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I just want to make sure that we don't feel like it's been discussed because we've discussed it here.
That is true. That is true. No, the PM group is going to meet separately and discuss this.
Fantastic. We've got 3 short minutes left for any additional action items and improvements that we'd like to see. And other than that, we'll just go quickly through the parking lot items, some of which I've been adding as we've talked here. Is there anybody else that would like to speak now on how to make this better?
Sorry, just on this feature proposal and so on, right? So kind of external to Google, the timeline works for us, right? If we do PR, proposal PR, it will probably take about a week at least to get to a point where we can start merging code. So I don't know, kind of, if we have this tight deadline and we're expecting features to make the deadline, can we get some kind of SLA on PR feedback?
To be clear, and again, I had not talked about this. I perhaps shouldn't have brought it up as quickly as I did. But to be clear, what I'm proposing, is that in order for your thing to appear in 1.4, your feature repo stub item needs to appear in the feature repo by the end of next week. And again, that's what I said previously. It sounds like that date is a little bit aggressive. That's fine. But what I'm saying is that it is by next Friday, you should have that template. You should have cloned the template, written a one sentence description of your feature and the title, and have it in the feature repo. Now that does require some groundwork for you, which is you've talked it over with your SIG and you generally feel like it's good, but you should not it should not block on PR reviews and things like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, David, my point is the opposite. I think if you're external to Google contributor right now, if it's ready by next Friday, you're most likely not going to make a release.
Because of PR velocity or review velocity?
Churn velocity, merge velocity, SIGs being kind of once a week. So just, I mean, we can try. I don't mind trying, and I'm all for deadlines. I'm just saying there will be features which probably going to automatically.
Well, I guess my take would be, if that's the case, if what you describe is the case, then you wouldn't make it anyway, because the week between now and then is not going to accelerate the merge velocity or PR velocity over the next 8 weeks.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So, but I mean, does it still make sense to put the features and then just with realizations that half of them probably will sleep to 1.5?
I mean, this is very much exploratory since it's the first time we've done it. Okay. I think that could be the case. I think if we weren't able, oh, sorry, Brian, go ahead.
I would just say I think it does, because we're trying to build up a backlog, and not everything will make it to 1.4. Not everything that's there even now will make it within 1.4. So I think it's fair. If you think that it's something that you'd like to target for 1.4 or maybe partially develop in that time frame, then I think it's fair to put it in.
Yeah. So then my suggestion, let's do at community meeting announce that to set expectations correctly, please submit your features. They will be helpful for determining backlog for 1.4 and 1.5. Instead of setting expectations that everything that's going to be there by next Friday will make it in 1.4.
Yeah, I mean, as we shorten the release cycles, we'll have more and more features that span multiple releases. And in practice, even the things we did for most of the past releases actually span multiple releases. Like pet set is just one example where really, it wasn't really done in time. We're calling it alpha. It's kind of usable, but as people said, not all the documentation is there, etc. I mean, really, it's an incomplete feature. That's just reality. So, we would like to actually get to monthly releases or maybe even shorter releases and have more of a train model where people are not targeting a specific release, but they work on their feature and it gets into some release and they don't have to wait too long for whichever release it gets into. But there are a lot of things we need to do in order to make that happen. I don't expect that to happen in the next 9 months, probably.
So is the guidance that we want to give err on the side of putting your one line in the featured repo, and it's not done with the assumption that it's going to be in 1.4? It's more that you're essentially getting on whatever train or cadence we're doing for the releases is?
That has to be the case.
Okay.
Yes. And as people said, 1.4 is a catch-up release. Every even release has been a catch-up release.
Right.
1.2 was the same. 1.2 was such a big release because it contained a bunch of stuff that was started at 1.0, right, and then didn't make it into 1.1.
Okay.
Brian, this is great. As long as it's kind of clear to everyone, right?
Right.
I think the problem is a little bit of lack of clarity and mismatched expectations from different players.
I mean, I would like very, very, very much to move to the Linux kernel model where the lock occurs very early on what's in a feature, and you get a 2-week window at the beginning of the release to merge everything in that you've been working on, everything leading up to the release. And it makes it very, very clear where your opportunities are, where your windows are, and also gives you lots of stabilization time so that the release happens elegantly. But the releases are so frequent that if you miss one window, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah. Some aspects of that, I think, make sense.
I'm just looking forward to hearing the actual release infrastructure that's going to be put in place to enable these faster releases. I really think there needs to be a little more discussion about that. Not here, but eventually. I look forward to that bright, shiny future. I just wanted to real quickly talk about, we have all these action items to address what didn't go well. I'm curious if we want to address the fact that community participation, especially on the help wanted labels, seem to work well. What could we do to continue to encourage that for the 1.4 release? It seems like maybe that could be another regular showcase at the community meetings or something. I'm certainly going to try to be more vocal about it at SIG testing for whomever attends that. But what could we do to raise the profile of this?
What do you think went well specifically with the help wanted?
So I'm asking the group here. Somebody else put that as a what went well thing. I'm trying to look at some of the stuff that went well and what can we do to keep doing that. And that seemed like the most interesting one that we could grow.
So one thing I'm working on is identifying, Mike was talking about how long it takes to get things merged and everything. So I think there are a few sides to that. One is in 1.3 and previously a bunch of people said we want these features to get in, and we didn't really assess whether realistically we had enough review bandwidth to actually get all those features in. So the answer to can we get an SLA on reviewing? The answer is no, not unless we actually constrain the amount of stuff that we say that we're going to review. And so we don't have a process for that yet. So anyway, we have a bunch of problems. Some of them are tooling. A lot of them are tooling. Some of them are code structure. We have a lot of process gaps. We have documentation gaps. And yes, Sarah, we need to train reviewers. That's part of both. That's a bunch of the process gap items. So I'm planning to, been accumulating this list over the past couple days, planning to send a note to Kubernetes dev about things that are sort of top concerns for me. And this is one of the big areas. If you look at the contributors graph for the project, we have grown the number of contributors in the project by an order of magnitude, and we've not increased the velocity at all. So, basically we have a lot more things going in parallel, and the amount of time that it takes to get those things merged is basically 10x longer than it used to be when we were doing 1/10 of things. So we, there are a bunch of sources of the problem. I'm not going to go over all of them now. But if we can get help from the community at chipping away at these things, like one thing that's very frustrating to me is the implementation of owners, which was just one of the dozens of problems that we have. But, it's been an outstanding issue for over a year, and multiple people have volunteered to do it, and everybody flakes out and nobody finishes it. So, basically I'm not adding anybody to Kubernetes maintainers anymore, even Googlers, unless someone actually implements this, right? So we need to get help from people to solve the problems that are impeding the entire project.
So here's just a real quick PR review sort of thing. I, as a non-Googler, noticed that sometimes issues or PRs are assigned to other Googlers to review. Would it be helpful if I still just added that person and say, hey, I looked over it and it looks good to me? Just
Absolutely.
To help save them some work. I'm trying to figure out what's the convention there.
Yeah, yes. So I have a great example.
Just to be mindful of time, we've got 3 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. And so the short answer is yes. And if you actually are familiar with an area of code, you go through and take a look, and you can give meaningful constructive feedback, or you think it looks fine and you say, hey, I'm really familiar with this area, it looks good to me, then that definitely will save us a lot of time. Another thing we need to do is actually, if you're really familiar with some area of the code, we should add you to the list of reviewers to get auto-assigned. It's not intended to be a Googler only thing. It's just, Red Hat and Google, when we initially implemented the tool to do auto-assignment, we tried to brainstorm a list of possible reviewers, and we did that, and then a year has gone by and that list has not been significantly updated, right? So we need help. Someone just go through the Git history, for example, and identify plausible reviewers for stuff. Mentioned by
you can make a PR that add yourself.
Doesn't like it's going to work. But
I was one of the breakouts, so we'll finish it. Sorry about that.
So I just
just put my name in the doc. We'll finish it in
terms of trying to drill this down to an actionable item, again, I think what Brian just said, just a brief statement of how you could help out on PERs and what you could do. However frequently and often and as many forums we can say that, we should do that.
Yes.
I think also maybe we need a meeting to actually address the velocity issue, because that's never going to get better unless we actually target it as something that gets better. So
yes, I agree.
So we have exactly 1 minute left. I want to thank everybody for your participation. I have to say that I had not expected us to have 2 solid, full, productive hours of retro. That's extremely unheard of in this setting, so I'm super thankful. Last thing is just an ask, if this is a value and is this something that we should continue for the next release. Would you like to see a 1.4 retro in a similar vein? If so, just +1 in the channel.
I would like to make sure in the next retro that we actually get the SIG leads all to attend.
That's a great idea. Okay, taking it as a SIG leads in retro. Yeah, that would be another milestone for them to ensure that the SIG continues probably. Great. Thank you all so very much. Have a great weekend, and look forward to more great work next week.
Yeah, thanks a lot for driving the meeting.
I'm glad to do it.
Thank you.
This has been fantastic. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.